Okay, we'll call our meeting to order. Let the minutes reflect all members are present. The first thing is to set the agenda. I would like to add under items of discussion, a new number 1, and that'll be an update on administrator's application and discussions. With that, anybody else have anything else you'd like to add? Okay, I'll need a motion.
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we approve the agenda with that additional item.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of the minutes?
Madam President, I move to approve the September 25th, 2019 regular meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
Consent agenda?
President Preiner, Board of Managers, we do have one application for your consideration. That's 1982 with Caprock items. You'll recall we did mention this one at our board workshop. This is the one with the indemnification easement because of the location next to RCD 4. Ready for any questions?
Any questions?
Is it, I have got it in front of me, or what you're
Right here,
saying?
yes, green.
No, I mean, I'm talking about this 1932. Where is it on here? I just
Would be
wondered,
Under the blue, correct?
under the blue?
That blue, I'm sorry.
It's 080.
I thought
Okay.
it was green.
Well, I see the
Page
19082.
page 19 of the packet is the consent agenda.
19 of the packet.
Right.
Yeah,
It has one item, right?
that's it. yeah.
And you're adding a new one.
No.
No.
Oh,
No.
Okay, I thought you said 1932 Caprock.
19082.
All
You
right.
said 82?
Correct.
Okay, so it is that one. But why did you mention that it's already on the agenda? Why did you say you added it?
President
We
Preiner. Board-
discussed,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, permit application 1982 on the agenda today for
Yeah.
consideration has Caprock items. At the workshop, we discussed an indemnification and easement document because of this project's location next to Ramsey County Ditch 4.
Right.
And so, of the Caprock items listed here, that is one of them, and I want to tie the two together for clarity.
Oh,
I'm sorry
okay.
if I
Okay.
confused.
It sounded like you're adding something
It
there.
wasn't added to, it was just.
It's not added. Okay, I just want to know, because I only had one, and I didn't know that was the number. Thank you.
Okay,
So-
anybody else?
So, in reading this, there's some specific language in there that talks about the indemnification of removing the spoil pile and things like that. And I thought that was a very good concept to put that in the permit, so it's clear as to how that's going to be in the future and provides certainty for the future maintenance of this
Yep.
and the corridor being preserved.
Thank you, Manager Waller. I'll just note, it is required to be recorded on the property as well, so future landowners will be subject to the same.
Okay.
Okay. Any further questions? Otherwise, we'll need a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion that we Caprock number 19-082.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Open mic. Anybody today for open mic? Please come, state your name and address for the record.
Always wanted to do this. Can you hear me now?
We see you.
First, I want to apologize. I'm not a public speaker, so if I stumble and everything, please be patient
Feel
with
free.
me.
Yeah.
Thank you for everything you guys do. I know I've been a resident on one of your ditches for 29 years now. I've worked with your inspector,
Name
Tom.
and address, please.
Oh, I'm sorry. See, I'm not good
That's
at
all
this.
right. Just said we have to have that on.
Yes,
Yeah.
4801 125th Avenue Northeast, which is also County Road 14,
Oh, sure.
sometimes known as Main Street,
Yep.
falsely known as 242.
And your name?
John Caldwell, JOHN CALDWELL. LL. Thanks. So what brings me here is safety, but I know my personal safety isn't your concern, but I think that there's been I'm cautious to use the term, but I think there was a deceitful miscommunication to this board that I wanted to highlight. And then if you guys are pulled into the questions that I have, maybe you can help me on my safety concerns. Anoka County recently did a reconstruction across the front of my house and several of my neighbors, and their permit was 19-003. And they claimed that there was less than 10,000 square foot of impervious surface change to their plan. And so your rule was not triggered for them to be approved with their plans for the actions. And my property and my neighbors and I were subject to another project about 25 years ago when they widened the road. And in the name of it, safety, I said, if you guys put a sidewalk in, and this is just to tell you where I'm coming from. I said, if you guys put in an off-ditch sidewalk, I'll give you my frontage. I don't want the money, I want safety. But of course, they decided that it wasn't right for the area, whatever, so they didn't. So now I've got bikers being passed by cars going 60, 65, because even though it's posted at 55, the data shows that. And this is how ridiculous Anoka County is. When it first came up 25 years ago, the manager or whatever role it is in charge of that said, well, in Anoka city limits, that roadway is measuring at about somewhere between 8 and 12 miles an hour. And because of the rules that they have to have an overall average of so high to qualify for whatever aid they get, or whatever those rules were, I didn't understand it at the time. But they said they're good with them speeding across the front of my place so that the average of the roadway is higher, which troubled me to no end. Anyways, that's where I'm coming from. I want it safe. Well, yes, sir?
Can I just ask you, whereabouts is 148th on?
4801. So
Or
I'm
48, yeah.
Yeah, so
where-
just-
I know it's on 125th, but I'm trying to get an idea.
just west of Robinson Sod,
Okay, thank you.
so between Sunset and Lexington Avenue.
Yeah, all right.
So we're in Glen.
Was there another question?
No, we were just trying to understand the location, for sure.
Yes, sorry. And so that's my perspective, that's my history. Well, a little bit more, when they did that, they took the road ditch, yeah, I should back up a little bit. So I have the county ditch out in my pasture, then that's when I deal with Mr. Schmidt and your crew, excellent crew. I consider myself a friend of the district. Tom and I have worked together over those almost 30 years. You know, and I've always offered, you need equipment in the area to just sit, put in my pasture or whatever. You know, I just want to make sure that you guys can do your thing, you know, of course, within reason. Everybody has their own perspective on reason. And that's why I'm here today, again, is safety. So, you know, we've been doing the embankment build-up and all that, and keep the cattle from messing up the work and things like that. But so when they first widened that ditch, or widened that road, they gave me a pretty tough slope on the roadway ditch. And even though it's not officially your ditch, it flows into your ditch about, I want to say 150 yards just east of my property. So it has an effect on the ditch that you guys have responsibility over. And they made a real steep slope, and I said, this is going to be impossible. So I never let my kids, when they were home, or my wife mow it. I ended up mowing it myself because there was always a threat of rolling over. And so, and now they changed it, And some of the parts are a 1-to-1 slope. It was at a 4-to-1. I was promised a 10-to-1. Went to 4-to-1. They said, "Oh, sorry, it's done." Well, now they've done it again, and I asked for, let's make this right now. And so now I've got a 1-to-1 slope in some areas, and here's the part that really troubles me, causing all this slope. They put in these monster culverts. For 25 years, there were 14-inch culverts under my driveway and my neighbors' driveways. They pulled all those out. Those were corrugated steel. And now for my neighbor upstream of me, they put in a 30-inch round pipe. So I didn't do the capacity analysis on that, but I know it's more than twice. If you have 14 and you go to 30, you have like 2.5 times more capacity there. So, and they're saying that, well, we didn't trigger any rule changes, and yet why would they need to increase the pipe? So that's the 30-inch pipe upstream of me. And then at my place, they put in 36-inch triangular rounded corners pipe. This is like a aqueduct kind of feature, which really makes it all the worse. And I said, and what they did upstream of me on the other side of my next door neighbor's driveway is they buried the culvert, put in a manhole, so that he's got like a 12-to-1 slope now. And yet I've got a 1-to-1 slope. And he's got commercial equipment. He's got a nursery business. I don't know if you're familiar with Tamblin's, but that's my next door neighbor to the west. So he's got something that can manage that. I can't put that kind of money into a mower, a commercial equipment, in order to mow this thing. And I've already killed one push mower just trying to cut down the weeds because they were about to bloom. Because of that slope, I mowed for about 1.5 minutes, and I kept trying to, up the slope down, up the slope down. And I killed the engine because of the oil. If the motor's running like this and the sump doesn't bring the oil up in, so I seized my engine. So I'm already paying for this ridiculousness. So I said, you guys can make my ditch cheaper and safer. Don't do that 36-inch pipe, which they say is $200 a foot. Go back to even the 30 that's just upstream of me. And our lots are only mine's 324 feet wide. For it to go from the capacity of a 14-inch pipe to a 36-inch pipe with that little bit of watershed, because there's actually a peak at the top of the ditch. And so my property doesn't drain, thank you. I don't have watershed going into that ditch. Most of mine goes, to the north instead of south into the ditch. Everything just seems so convoluted, and they won't fix it. And when I started looking at this, I looked at these plans, and they subverted the process where you guys would look at this and say, wait a minute, what are you doing this for? And so I think if they had complied with the rules, I'd have some leverage. But instead, it's kind of like, oh, no, some engineer agreed to this, but I don't think there was any oversight. And that's why I'm coming to you to plead my case of, I want a safer ditch. You guys need capacity to be maintained. And I think if both were properly analyzed, I wouldn't be in this and have to take off work, which I don't get paid for.
Well, I appreciate you coming in, and I'm thinking, I don't know if Chris would want to respond now, because he was probably involved in some of that review or not, but maybe we need to look at that and go back to that permit.
President.
And go ahead.
Thank you. President Priner, Board of Managers, I did hear about this, John, from Tom a little bit, in your concern.
What's your name, sir?
I'm sorry, Nick Tomczak.
Thank you, Nick.
I'm the interim administrator for the district. Tom had disclosed to me some of your conversations and him following, if you will, board policy and our vetting tools as to the applicability of the situation to his duties. And I did have some conversation, I think Chris and I brushed on it, but maybe more so with Greg at Houston. We do have a permit application, which is 19003. You are correct, it did not trigger our stormwater Rule C.
And that's their claim, right? Sorry to interrupt, but,
That is based on their submitted application and materials for the project.
right, so that's their statement, nobody else's.
That's correct. It's our review of their submitted materials.
Right, but
I'll
you're
go-
dependent on their statement. I mean, you didn't tape measure out or anything like that, or,
No,
right?
we did not.
Sorry to interrupt, but
Yep.
I wanted to clarify on that point.
Certainly. From that, maybe a point of clarification, it's 10,000 square feet of new impervious area that would trigger the rule, not the milling, it's the net increase, if you will. So maybe that's a point of clarification. Beyond that, long story short, I would be in alignment with Tom that it is not fall under our preview or trigger any of the district's vetting tools for our involvement in that. I did make the effort, and I'll ask you, John, at what time did the county come back to the site and redo the ditch or something? You said they redid it and now it's steeper than it was?
Well,
Is that just
the initial
recently?
work was 25 years ago, and now this
Oh.
project happened in
Okay.
the last, couple months.
Okay,
And so then I challenged them right away when they were doing this.
yeah,
And are you familiar with Harry Grams?
no,
He's with the county, and so he was the boss of the inspector. So I was working with him.
yeah.
And-
If I could, John, just
Sure.
to
Sorry.
bring to my point, I'm understanding that just recently, within the last week, you haven't been contacted further by the county. Because my action at the point that I realized that we didn't have any involvement was to reach out to the county, and I reached out to Joe McPherson, who's not the
He-
top engineer, but
He's the one that submitted the permit request.
right, that's correct. And told him of the situation and wanted him to be apprised of it so he could take any necessary action. Long story short, he said he would reach out to you and try and resolve your concern. If you would like to leave your phone number, I can make sure he gets that. But beyond that, to the board specifically, and certainly you can ask more of Mr. Otterness, from what policies you've developed in our administration of the rule, we wouldn't have an involvement in this. Although, I don't discourage or disparage his concern, that's certainly
Madam
one of his
President, if I
interests.
could ask a question. Yeah, let's assume we had jurisdiction that it came under our purview. Since this is a right-of-way ditch, it's not affecting our ditch directly, other than what comes into our ditch as a lateral. Would we have any control over the size of the culverts? Thank you. Culverts that they put in? Or the slope?
President Priner, Board of Managers, and Mr. Otterness, as he eagerly awaits, I would just say, we would look to see that the culvert is of sufficient capacity to probably pass the 100-year event or the critical event going through it. The side slopes and that side of things really come under road safety jurisdictions, those types of things.
So follow-up question, if it's too large, we probably wouldn't have a concern from our standpoint, because it would have the capacity.
Under regulation, if we were regulating it, we'd probably look to see that there was no adverse impact from a culvert of any size,
Okay.
large or
The
small.
adverse impact in terms of flow and sediment.
Adverse impact could be flow and sediment, could be ponding and upstream condition, or too much going downstream compared to the existing condition.
Okay.
But I think Mr. Otterness best clarify that.
Madam
Go
President,
ahead.
before
John
Chris.
first.
So I want to be clear here, John. When you began your chat, your presentation, you said you felt there was a violation of the 10,000 square
Yeah.
feet impervious rule.
right.
And just to add, Nick clarified that to say that it had to be new impervious, not just 10,000 total, but net in addition. Do you feel that there was, or is after the construction, a net impervious surface gain greater than the 10,000 rule that would trigger our interest in it? Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's two things that come to mind to address that. The first one is, it looks like some of the culvert comes from under the road, which may even mean across the road. I don't know where that all comes from, but the dynamic of just running along the roadway. You can't put my, I have pictures of how this is. It's really weird.
Sure.
So, it's on my phone. But,
Use the overhead.
Overhead on the phone?
See if you can
Might
get
learn
it
something.
underneath the camera.
so,
That's my question.
I'm sorry, I didn't know
That's
that.
my question.
Won't take your question.
No, I'm glad you asked it. Yeah,
There we go.
we see it, it's
Perfect.
beautiful,
Beautiful.
beautiful.
so this is my driveway
Perfect.
downstream of the flow.
Okay.
So that's this new, like I say, it's like an aqueduct kind of capacity. That's upstream. And also, you'll note that they've created holding ponds. We've had, I know we've had a lot of rain this year, but we've also had a week or two of no rain. And I've got these mosquito breeding spots here so that slope isn't right. They're holding where they shouldn't, and maybe that's good for your ditch, but it isn't good for me. And this is my next door neighbors. This is 1-to-1 right here. That's a 45-degree bank. At 4-to-1, I almost roll over. How am I supposed to mow that? And then this is, like I say, that's a gentle slope because they've buried the culvert. Now, right here, that's the one that, I mean, that's not flowing with the ditch. That's going at an angle like this. So I don't know where that water's coming from. I don't know how much they've added with this. The other thing is, if they did not add 10,000 square feet of impervious surface, why do they go from 14-inch pipe to 36? I mean, why would they add $200 square foot cost to $50 a stick steel pipe? Something happened. They're being deceitful, or they're being reckless with the dollars spent. And I'm guessing it's not about the dollars spent being a reckless thing. So this is further upstream. This is Ron Tamblin's driveway with the gentle slope. This is my next door neighbor. That's how much of a difference that is. This is looking upstream, and you can see where I'm pointing. Right here is a manhole. So that's where they feed into the upstream water, and then it goes over here, and then it comes back and comes out again. So it goes like this. But what happens under that road is what I don't get. Why all that? And this used to just, well, I don't even know. But you can't see where, on the other, this is where that new school is, the elementary school, Sunrise School. So they did a lot of work there, and a lot of parking lot, a lot of impervious surface. Where is that water going? So I don't know any of the answers, but it sure doesn't smell right.
President Preiner, those are all good questions from Mr. Caldwell. I suspect the county would very much be able to answer those much better than us, or more appropriately from them, to the concern of impropriety by the county, perhaps. If the board would like it, I guess we could ask for the as-built condition of, or look at the piping and where it goes, but I'm not so quick to be concerned about that. I suspect it has a engineering rationale, and those don't always line up with the property owner's preference, especially when the right-of-way of the county is directly adjacent to their property and their preferred use. I think Chris did want to note maybe why that pipe might be bigger. I suspect it may have something to do with if there's still runoff coming from the school off to that'd be the west, I would say, and what would happen in a 100-year event, but I won't speculate any further.
Madam President, yeah, I personally don't know the reason for the resizing of that culvert. I know that Tom Schmidt, he had also mentioned that to me, that he was aware that that pipe had gotten larger in that location. And, I mean, there can be multiple different reasons why the highway department might do a resizing of the pipe. Sometimes it's related to the availability of a pipe. If somebody happens to have the next size higher.
It's like
and-
putting a false tooth in a mouth because it can fit in there.
And as Nick indicated, and related to your question, Manager Bradley, the sizing of a culvert to make it larger along a drainage system like a ditch or something like that, particularly in this kind of case, would not be something that, as a district, we would have concern related to the rule. It'd be more of a concern for us if they made the culvert smaller, or if we were aware that there was a size issue of it being smaller that would hinder the ability of drainage to get out. But it is something that I see very frequently on the landscape, but particularly along county roads where they have oversized culverts. Sometimes it's because they are concerned that there's sediment that might build up in it, and they don't want to have to come back routinely to jet it out to, when that opening gets smaller. Sometimes it's to make it larger so that they don't have rodent issues that go in there. Again, in this case, I have no idea what the motivation for the county was, but I would highly suggest that you have a discussion with the counties directly about that to get an understanding from their perspective. And as Nick indicated, it seemed like it would be the more appropriate direction to take your concerns.
Yeah, I think the best thing though, I think is Joe McPherson is a really good guy. I mean, he'll explain everything to you before we would try to even get involved. I think it's good that they have that conversation. So I would really like Nick, if you would, to facilitate, make sure that happens, and so that we start to know the reasoning that they had. I mean, I'm sure it's all engineered, may not be what we all would like, but I'd like to know the facts as far as
Madam
their
President,
reasoning.
I agree with that approach to trust but verify.
Yeah.
And so therefore, since our folks haven't looked at it on the ground necessarily, or since the permit was issued, I think it's reasonable that to see if there actually is a net increase in impervious surfaces there. And that's what would trigger our rule into it. And then we can verify as a third party whether or not our permits have been obeyed.
Good. Nick?
It was suggested, if I may,
Go ahead.
it was suggested multiple times that it would cost too much to make this like the next door neighbors, to bury it. And for them to throw that out there, even though they've exceeded their initial they've increased their initial cost by putting in that big pipe. They said they can't spend, it's all about the money, so we're not gonna do that. And it's so funny. You said, just have a good conversation with them, right? Every time I was on site, so the first time I called and I said, you guys gotta do some stuff about it. They didn't have proper signage too. They had traffic signs saying, you gotta merge into a barrier wall. Whoa, you don't really wanna tell people on a rainy night, you gotta go to your left when there's a barrier wall there. They didn't fix that for weeks. I have moved their signs to make them in the right spot. They're exhibiting a lack of concern for safety and well-being. But to the point of trying to have a discussion, so I called this Harry Grams, and I don't know where he fits in relationship to Joe McPherson.
Mr. Caldwell, President Priner, if I might. The hierarchy at the county, I would say that Mr. McPherson is above Harry Grams, and we're suggesting that a conversation with him maybe add the clarity that you're seeking to understand what's going on.
Right.
One of our managers has suggested that we look to the as-built condition and consider that, and we're happy to do that. And then, like I said earlier, if you would leave your phone number, we'll make sure that Joe gets it. I can't make Mr. McPherson make the phone call, but he was receptive when I noted your concern. I am going to say, with due respect to you, that the safety in those things, well, as citizens and humans, we're all very concerned about that. As a board in our function as a watershed district, we don't have much involvement in that from a road safety standard and such. So I certainly appreciate the, what I'll call ancillary information, but it isn't really productive for us to try and digest that further. So the two actions, if you're hopefully receptive to them, leave your phone number with Teresa, and I'll give Mr. McPherson a call to reach out to you, and then I will also seek those as-built conditions from the county so that our engineer can give them a look over and see if there was any concern that they were not compliant with the district's rules in any way. And for that matter, any other matter that's within our jurisdiction. Would it be
Very
okay to
good.
leave it at that?
Well, I do need to point out one more thing that clarifies the lack of trust that should be exhibited for Anoka County. So when I first contacted Harry, because he was the boss's boss of the on-site inspector, he said he'd come out and look, and he's just like shaking his head, yeah, this is bad, this is bad. I said, okay, so why don't we bury it like they did upstream? Well, I don't know. I'm going to have to noodle it. And then it was agreed that we were going to meet back up and review it. Because fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me, right? And so I said, okay, so let's noodle this then. Let's get back together. When you have some ideas, let's get back together. And then a few weeks after that, I don't have the exact date, but I can look it up if I need to. Chris Osterhus, who's in between Harry and the inspector, he was out there with the crew, and I just happened to be going from one job site to the next, and the most expeditious route did go through my, across the front of my house. So I thought, well, I'll just work lunch in at home there. I pull up, and I see, like 10 guys all dressed like me and one guy in a golf shirt. What's going on here? And here Chris was telling the crew what they were about to do in like 3-4 days. No, hold the phone. Harry and I never got back together. So then, we got it all figured out now. Well, what they figured out was atrocious too. It made a cavern in the middle of this whole thing. Instead of this long Grand Canyon thing, now I've got this like short whatever. And they're not being legitimate participants of a discussion. They're just slamming this stuff through. And when I said, again, let's talk about, doing this right. Nope, costs too much. That's $200 a foot. I said, well, you don't need that. Take that out and go to the 30-inch, go to the 14-inch, whatever. Oh, it's, we can't afford that. You going to pay for it? I said, this isn't my fault. And then he accused me of attacking him when I said, you guys made it 4-to-1 slope before. Oh, well, now you're attacking me, he says. And the Anoka County Highway Department is an entity, just as you guys. Even if this board, if not, thank you for your time on the board. But if a previous board did something 5 years ago, I mean, let's face it, you guys are still responsible for what happened. He said, no,
So,
that wasn't me.
President Priner, if I might, Mr. Caldwell, the board itself has run into that where we've had to make corrections for past mistakes, but again, those are specific to the Watershed District matters.
Right,
I think we'd like to bring this to a close so that we can proceed with the rest of the agenda. But notably, the two actions, your phone number, and we'll get that to the gentleman at the county. And then secondarily, maybe to try and reiterate here, Manager Waller's position to acknowledge but verify, we will look at those plan sets to see. Now, the only respectful caution that I'm going to add here is that the right-of-way is just that, a separate ownership, and I'm sure I would hope that the county's intent is to be as cooperative with its neighbors as it can be, while it balances the driving public safety. And I'm sorry to hear about your concerns, but really, I think those are the best two actions that the district can offer you.
I think we know what we can start with, and then I think maybe in the conversation you have with Joe McPherson, maybe you'd want to be involved in that a little bit, Nick, just to listen in, or however you can arrange it between them, because it's always good to have another set of eyes and ears at the meeting.
So, Madam President, no, I don't want to get your hopes up.
Yeah.
I just want to, because this happened to me in my memory before Madam President and I were on this board. So we've been here about a dozen years. And I think it might even been while you were absent at the legislature. But my hometown of Hugo did the same kind of bad behavior in a road construction on a property, and it involved backyards of people's children, and it was very, very dangerous, a steep slope, and it had to do with the drainage of, I believe, a stormwater pond is how the district got involved in it. But there was some kind of coordination at the time between the district and the city in which it was piped, and the slope was changed in the back and in that situation. It's somewhat similar, so I'm going to ask, it was on Oneika Lake Boulevard. Mr. Administrator, 147th Street out there, I'll have to look, and you can look back in the records then, is what I'm going to say, as part of your trust and verify expedition. But I recall it because I was complaining about the side, the steepness of the slope being a safety factor going in the ditch and that area.
Right.
But I don't want to get your hopes up too high, because I don't know that this is, the district involves stormwater pond drainage out along the road to get to a culvert, to get to the ditch, and that was the authority that the district could exert. And that's what's important here, is that we find, if we're going to see, that's what the trust and verify is, to see if there's some authority the district has here. That's why the 10,000 feet discussion is such. And so we'll try our best at that.
And the most important point, though, is that we don't have authority to tell them at what
Right,
angle.
right at this, yeah.
No,
We don't
Right.
have any
We
authority.
don't have authority to fix what you really want fixed.
I really appreciate your position, I do. And I especially appreciate the opportunity to air out my concerns. There was one final thing, and I know you know, officially it's probably not relevant to anything, and yet further paints this picture. Both Chris and Harry, probably 6'2" or 3". I don't know if you haven't met them. I'm only 5'9". Every discussion I had, they'd change their position, and there's a lot of slope there. They'd change their position in a domineering effect to stand above me. If we're standing on level ground, I'm looking up at them respectfully.
Yeah,
But then
I
they
think-
position themselves
On the bank.
in
Yeah,
this
and that's normal.
intimidating thing. They don't want to play nice. They don't want to work with me. They want to drive this home to whatever they think should be, because they've decided what's right.
We appreciate it, we're gonna follow through, and we will be contacting
And
you.
give
or the-
Teresa
yeah,
your,
phone
you
number.
give it.
Okay.
Thanks again
Yep,
for,
thank you for coming in.
your time and everything you guys do.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay.
President Priner, Board of Managers, the next item on the agenda, as I see it, is the City of Forest Lake intergovernmental agreement. We did have a presentation at the workshop on Monday from Tim Olson of Bolton and Mink, as well as a Forest Lake representative. They're looking to do stormwater planning on JD4 and a little bit of JD2. And this agreement would allow us to move forward and cover 50% of the cost, not to exceed, that number's in here, if I can find it. Oh, there it is. Top of page 29, 50%, not to exceed $31,650. That is consistent with the proposal that Bolton and Mink provided. I'll only note that the agreement document as draft was provided to the city, and I haven't heard back from them. So if the board does authorize the president to sign it, we'll maybe wait to see if they have any concerns. Then we'll have legal check to see if they're of any substance, substantial or otherwise, and go from there.
Madam President, I'd like and make a motion to authorize the president to enter Rice Creek Watershed District into an agreement with the City of Forest Lake to undertake a regional planning study, JD4 and JD2, drainage areas, including the fact that it would be done at 50%, not to exceed $31,650, plus there is an agreement draft that should be shown before it is signed, and any other non-substantial modification is reviewed by the district council.
I'll second that, but I have some comments.
Motion and a second, comments?
Yes. This is an agreement that's primarily for the development of the JD4 area, and it does mention JD2 in it. So I want to be mindful here that Hardwood Creek JD2, that entity, is a drainage from multiple cities, okay? It's not only Forest Lake, that small portion of it, there's Lionel Lakes, Columbus, a large portion of Hugo, a larger portion of Forest Lake east of Highway 61 and Hugo also, and even a little bit of Scandia and 160 acres of May Township. And so when we get into I expect this part of the planning process will be primarily in the portion of the JD4 in the corridor between 35E and 35 and Highway 61, because this says here between the county line, for example, and Washington County West line and Highway 61, and we've already had one in Columbus that's down parallel to that. But we should be in mind that Hugo has a large water tower on 165th Street, and the city lines are 180th, and so I imagine they'll be building in Hugo before they build 180th in Forest Lake, because they're up at 100. We're talking about that 190th area in there.
Yeah.
To be to 200 to be filled in, and so I just want to be mindful of that this kind of a study, that's a massive drainage area, this Hardwood Creek JD4 from multiple cities here. And this is primarily for JD2 and not 4. But this is primarily for 4, that we should be conscious of those other systems because of all those cities. And in addition, JD7 drains east of 61 and JD5 in Forest Lake and in the future. So.
Let me ask you this then. Yes, to be mindful, but for this particular thing,
No.
it has to be defined?
Yeah, I understand the definition.
So in other
of it.
words, we're not going out
Right,
to...
I understand the
Yeah.
definition of it.
And I understand your
But the
concern.
definition includes the southeast, a little bit of JD2 in there, it's mentioned.
Yeah, it's
And
mentioned.
so, and I assume it's going to be the last place they ever get to, and so I just wanted to point out that's really something to take a look at.
Okay.
Because that corridor is going to be built south of the Forest Lake city line in the JD2 soon too. And so maybe some kind of planning agreement to this is necessary with Lionel Lakes and Hugo and Forest Lake for the other parts.
Madam President, just to provide a little clarification and build on what Manager Waller was saying. So the scope that they're providing in this proposal, as Manager Waller indicated, it does not only include portions of JD4, but also portions of area that drain into JD2, but it does not actually include Judicial Ditch 2 itself or the main trunk or any of its branches. However, I just, for a little clarity, the primary focus that they've provided in this proposal will be on the main trunk of JD4 and branch 3 of JD4, which are the two northernmost tile lines that are part of JD4 that come into that main trunk. And that, as Manager Waller alluded to, because the anticipated growth of development is going to be starting from north down to south, the branch 4 of JD4 and then those areas that drain toward JD2 on the southeast side of Forest Lake, those would be envisioned as part of the scope to be looking at simply the flow rates off of the landscape in their present condition rather than looking into that more extensive study with modeling. And that's just try to clarify their scope that they're presenting.
What's it doing? Okay. Other comments? Okay.
Thanks for the background, John.
Check register.
Well, we haven't voted.
We did,
Oh.
yeah.
Gotta say yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, Madam President, I move to approve check register dated October 9th, 2019, in the amount of $160,875.33.
That's not the number I'm looking at.
What did I say, 180?
168,
Oh,
75.
wait, there's- so there's-
$178,875.
Would you turn to page 37?
Wait. Okay. The check register is actual? Yeah. Thank you. No
So
problem.
Okay.
this number is
All
different
right.
than this
That
one.
was just a test.
I understand. I'm gonna start over here. Move to approve the check register dated October 9th, 2019, in the amount of $160,566.15, prepared by Redpath and Company.
And that one I can second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so number one on our discussion and information, I had added that in. And the purpose of that is to say that we have had, well, let's start back to our meeting after the applications came in. Manager Bradley and I were directed to go ahead and start working with interim administrator Nick Tomczak to come up with some kind of a plan or some kind of an agreement as to the future of his employment as administrator. We have had 3 meetings. One was before and one was after our workshop last week, and then we had another meeting yesterday. So with that, to get to the actual offer and stuff, we will have a special meeting. I'd like to schedule it for next Monday morning, if that's possible with the rest of the board, so that we can go into the detail of the offer and the contract.
Is the office open? That's Columbus Day.
It's Columbus Day, yeah, I assume we're open? Okay.
You're open?
Yeah, I
Okay.
have no problem with that. I just
Anybody?
have to check my schedule.
okay.
Columbus Day is not a state holiday.
Oh, okay.
The state transferred the Columbus Day for the day after Thanksgiving and state holiday, so it's, Columbus Day is not a state holiday.
Okay, so can we set a time, 10 o'clock? Good for everybody?
Good.
Good?
The 14th you were talking about?
Next Monday, yes, 14th. And
10
then we will have to
o'clock.
post that.
And that's at Rice Creek.
At Race Creek. And I would like it posted so that we are able to have a final vote if possible, if we come to an agreement. So it allows us to do it. If we don't do it, we don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that, if it.
For me.
Okay, well then with that, we'll go to the next one. It'd be district engineer update and timeline. Anything, staff?
Yes, President Preiner, a couple of things to mention. The board has been invited to the Washington County reception with the commissioners after the budget workshop on October 15th. We've re-noticed to include that, so if you'd like to attend that as well, it will follow
What time
immediately.
is that?
Immediately after the budget workshop, which is immediately after the regular scheduled
Isn't that Tuesday?
county meeting.
So that always changes in
Which
time.
which is immediately before the mod meeting, huh?
No, my,
Well, we have mod meeting Tuesday night, yes.
And that's October,
That is
15th.
October
It's next
15th.
Tuesday.
Yes.
So there's the workshop, and then whatever time they get to.
Done with that,
Okay.
they go into the Watershed District budget
Okay.
meeting.
Yeah,
and then
that'd
a
be a good idea.
reception.
Just notice it, whoever wants to come or stay or whatever.
Okay, it starts at 9 o'clock, and that's the budget meeting, and after we're done, they're
No,
done.
no,
No,
the
the-
county board meeting starts at 9 AM.
County Board,
After
Washington
the county
County.
board meeting is done, they will go into a workshop. So let's assume they have an
Okay.
hour
That'd be
at
usually-
10
Okay.
o'clock.
At
Then
10
they'll
o'clock.
have a workshop, and that usually seems to last about till noon. At least my past experience has been that.
Okay,
And then after that, they're talking about a reception. So it was, I'm reckoning it was around lunchtime.
all right, reception afterwards.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
It's my best guess. Maybe they'll serve cookies.
President Priner, Board of Managers, just as a note, as Manager Waller noted, it ending around noon, Chris and I will be at the Water Resource Conference providing a presentation
Yeah.
right that afternoon. So hopefully that meeting won't last too long. Certainly we'll do our presentation, and then we'll just have to
Yeah.
coordinate and be attentive to our
Adjust
time.
accordingly, yeah.
Yeah, yep. Second item, if you will, last night obviously was our JD3 landowner information meeting. I did note that Len Pratt was there, and I approached him. He is a developer in the area. He was very pleased with the work that the district was doing. I thought that was nice of him to share, and so I thought I'd pass it along. Beyond that, Mr. Morrell, Jeff Morrell, contacted the district. This is a gentleman who petitioned us on 10/22/32. We had a short discussion on it Monday, and Mr. Kolb gave us his guidance as to how to proceed. In any event, Mr. Morrell noted that he was asking what time was the meeting at, and gall darn it, you missed it, Jeff. I left him back a message to let him know that, and also that along the lines of the guidance that Mr. Kolb left us, that we did indeed receive his letter, that there were distinct differences between the administration of WACA as well as the public drainage system and the petition that he had filed with us, and that we will be likely sending a letter of response on that matter and how the district might proceed, which I could read it if you like, but John was basically saying that it might be best if we proceed with hearing the petition, setting the public hearing and such. So if that's all sounds consistent with your understanding, when John sends the letter, I will do some judgment and review of it, and as long as it's consistent with that, I'll go ahead and he will send it to Mr. Morrell's attorney, unless you'd like to see it beforehand.
Anybody?
Mr. Brad?
no, we covered this, I thought, quite well at the.
Okay.
At the workshop.
Okay.
Well, did he just ask for a response as to what happened that day, or does he just miss the meeting?
He missed the meeting, but his phone message said something like, where do we go from here, kind
Oh,
of
okay.
thing.
So
So I
that's
just
what we're gonna do.
alluded
Okay.
that a letter would be forthcoming. Yep.
Okay. Anything else?
Beyond that, I'll just note the two letters that we had previously discussed in regards to enforcement, and also the resolution that we were looking to tidy up, if you will, and add our letter process. The two landowners that we sent letters to, their team did take some additional action. I'll note that the inspectors still have concern, but I'm looking to exercise some judgment here as to the severity of the ongoing issue, and that we may or may not want to, as they say, die on our sword about these and involve a lot of deal if we can just keep tasks moving forward. So I thought I'd share that with you, and also then the resolution. We are working to draft that up, and I hope to bring that back to you here as we, later in the winter season. That's all I have.
Okay, managers' updates. Manager Bradley,
No, have nothing.
Manager Waitman,
Nothing?
Manager Hockey.
I'd just like to say, if we could, on whatever our next workshop meeting is, just a little bit clarification on the funding of the ditch and a branch. And, because we were just having a meeting last night, and there has been some conflict of understanding, so, yeah.
I'm
just
very glad
something
you
to
brought
do.
that up, because I was gonna, and I forgot.
Yeah, you were gonna bring it up.
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
All right.
So if that could just be on a workshop agenda.
Okay, do you want to clarify as to what you really would want? What
I
we're-
personally, I would like a better understanding of the whole situation as far as what is considered, to be
I think it's the same thing you're doing.
Trunk system?
trunk, that's
Yeah,
what, thank
yeah,
you very
yeah.
much. That's what I was trying to get at, the trunk system. And are there any branches that aren't part of the trunk system, and how that, I would just like a history, and I'm not real clear on it.
So, President Preiner, if I might, for clarity, and Chris, you be listening close too, please. The distinction between trunk system and the rest of it, and the district's policy in distributing cost among ad valorem and watershed management
That's what you're
district,
asking, yeah.
the historic
all on the same page.
60-40 split kind of
Absolutely.
deal.
Yeah.
And I'll just note here, and we'll get into it deeper at a workshop, probably in November, that I think you've, like on 5362, you applied it differently, but the circumstances were unique. But we'll bring all of that to the discussion.
And difference in the phases, you know, like phase
For
1,
JD
2,
three?
3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Anybody else? Anything else you want?
That's what I wanted, thank you.
Andrew,
Oh,
what?
everybody knew about October 15th mod, right? At 7 o'clock at Capital Region,
Oh, correct. Yep.
Metro mod.
So we had a very good meeting at Hugo last night. A number of people turned out, and it was worth having it. I thought the engineers did a good job of presenting it, and so did Administrator Tomzak did well. I think that these are important. It's an interesting discussion that you bring up about trunk and branches. The more and more I look at this, the more and more the need for more decisions and the need for the legislation that you're all opposed to provide for the funding for the long-term maintenance of these systems and in a more equitable business. And you had quite a few comments on very positive comments and from those audience members and others from others from homeowners associations who were in the audience that night, because there were several homeowners associations there. For Tom Schmidt and Miss Ashley Rickey. They're very happy to work with them, and that's good.
I think it worked out really well. Right. That's
And
good.
Madam President, I liked sitting in the audience instead of up on
Well, John, we
Well.
can get you back there. It's a choice.
Well, I don't think we will be able to do that without we being
Oh,
part
I'd
of it.
miss you anyway, John.
All right, anything else on that note? Need a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So Monday at 10.